Topsnappodcast.com, Topsnappodcast.com, Topsnappodcast.com. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Not live, but live for us. We're live.
Hello.
This is Topsnap Podcast number 2 for you non-bilinguals. Numero uno. This is Keola, otherwise known as Rolls with Ols. We have Lauren Lalava over here, and me, Jason Medina. Nice to see all you getting out there in cyberspace. So I guess this podcast is all about having a better podcast, because the number 1 went out, and we submitted that, and we got some feedback from a few people, like they couldn't hear Lauren's voice sometimes because she didn't have a mic. The mics are not on, as you can tell. This is all... We're being vocal to the...
We're still grassroots. We're in progress.
Well, I just don't have the mic. Yeah, again, this goes through this thing called Scarlet program through the Focusrite. It's basically an audio mixer sort of thing, and it goes right to the computer. But we don't know how to sync the camera to the mics.
We're learning process.
So we could have this, or we could have this, and I figured the picture's worth a couple words, so...
Video and audio, at least.
Yeah, well, at least we have video and audio. It's just not as quality as the audio we'd like to have. And but I think the setup is good, and we're gonna make this a quick one. We're gonna make it like 25 minutes, and we're gonna go from there. So this is going to obviously entail, like I said, a better podcast. So me and Keola were having a little discussion in a drive not too long ago, just a couple hours ago. We were going up to the Valley area, and we were talking about Joe Rogan, how when he started his podcast, how he just went ahead and just hooked up some equipment in his living room or his dining room or something like that, one of his extra rooms in his house, and then just put on a podcast. And that's kind of what we did here. I mean, we have the studio, put a camera up and just record it, and then post it on YouTube and put it on the web, and I guess just see what happens, right? That's basically what you were saying.
You gotta start somewhere.
And that's what you were saying. You gotta start somewhere.
Gotta crawl.
But I think you and I had a little bit of a debate.
What was it? Remind me, I forget. Remind me.
Totally forgot what this conversation was about, by the way.
I think the debate was, I was kind of trying to associate starting the podcast with other things that I've done in the past in my life that I feel like I could have accomplished more if I would have just done more, regardless of what I did and how much I think I did. If I could have executed it a little bit better, if I could have gone through the stages and the steps a little bit more detailed, that I might have been able to do something. Like when I was racing motorcycles, like he and I both raced motocross for a number of years, and I was trying to become an AMA pro and get on, go make some money being an AMA pro. And in that journey, I felt that there was just a lot of trials and tribulations, like anything else that you're chasing any dream. But I didn't go after the kind of help that I needed. The right kind of management, the right kind of ideas to come through, and scheduling myself correctly. It just, again, my follow through. And Keola, would you become an AMA pro, right?
Did some races.
Yeah.
Not so successfully, but...
You were out there.
I went out there and tried to compete.
So what's the difference between what you both did? You
the
competed
time,
and you competed, right?
I think Jason almost was like done riding when I kind of like got into racing.
Pretty much. My old company, Clearview at the time, was sponsoring Keola and a couple other riders and a couple snowboarders, and we were kind of getting into that whole, like, this is right when the X Games pretty much started, so we were looking after sponsoring boarders and extreme
Is that how you two
sports.
met, like through this process?
Exactly.
Yeah?
Well, because we had some mutual friends, Hawaiian guys that came over here from Kauai, and they said, "Oh, our buddy Keola,
dirt bike was definitely the connection."
Yeah, he was racing.
One up.
Now, what happens? You were traveling. Were you traveling back and forth from like Washington to California?
I went to Arizona, Vegas. Like, not all of the West Coast races, but a lot of them.
But I mean, you were doing other West Coast, like were you doing small like venues like Glen Helen
Yeah, I went to Glen Helen.
Carlsbad at all?
Paris. I never went Carlsbad.
Carlsbad's probably already closed by the time you were racing here.
I think it was actually.
De Anza was definitely closed. There's a bunch of racetracks that were pretty prominent in California at the time for you non-motorcycle racers. And a lot, the motorcycle scene in the 70s and 80s was pretty big, and then it started to taper off, and they started closing more and more and more, till where in the early to mid 90s, most of the tracks were around in the 70s, 80s, no longer existed. California Speedway, I believe that was another one.
Did you start in Hawaii?
Yeah. What was that other one in Irvine? Lake Irvine?
Oh man, there was a lot of
What's
them.
that place
Carlsbad, there was De Anza up there, and then there was down Barona Oaks, down in San Diego. I don't even know if Barona Oaks is still around. Anyways, there was a bunch of tracks, and I guess to digress back, so he and I met through that association of motocross, and befriended one another, and
That's
then
cool. I
yeah.
didn't know that about you too.
But I think the biggest difference between the two is that, again, this goes back to what I was talking about, is I said to him on the trip, I said, I wish I would have, I said, I'm not going to allow now to happen to me now what happened to me then. I was chasing the motorcycle dream to be a professional motocross racer.
You're talking about execution now.
Yes, follow through, execution.
But don't you think that was one of the kind of stepping stones of you getting to this point and deciding that as well? Do you think that's part of the process of your journey?
Yeah, but that's what my point is that during the process of your journey, whatever journeys you've had in the past and journeys you're setting forth in the future, I think you need to learn from your history. It's important. So by reflecting back on my past, there was a couple opportunities, and one in specific I was talking to Kill about is that I used to sneak on to the Kawasaki test track. They had a test track just for professional riders, for their sponsored guys. And it was right off the 15 freeway.
And he would bring a Suzuki dirt bike.
I'd bring my Suzuki dirt bike and go and sneak in and break in. I'd break in, yeah. And
just sore thumb.
There's one time in specific, like it was funny because Rhino Hughes, he was factory, I believe, but he didn't have any kind of real big name yet. He's really, really young. He pulled up in it was a red pickup truck, and he had his girlfriend in the front seat, and he was pulling up to go ride the practice track. And I was there on the outside, kind of waiting for someone to show up so I could go in. And he asked me, hey, so were you invited here? And I was like, no, I was just hoping to get some practice laps in. You know, I've been coming here with my friend John, and he's all, well, I didn't let you in. And he opened the gate and let me in.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, he's super cool. And as long as I stayed clear of him, he was cool. He was fast as shit back then. But
wow.
And the guy's still fast for being as old he is. The last time I saw some footage, the guy
all those dudes are still fast.
Still has it.
Interesting.
Yeah, but so to digress a little bit, so I'm showing up to the Kawasaki practice test track quite often, and it was right down the street from my house, pretty much, like right down the 15 freeway. And one time there was a couple pros there practicing, and I was practicing on the track, and some guy was there watching, and he said he came up to me after when I got to the car. The truck, and he said he'd asked me a question. Hey, would you be interested in somebody managing you? And I kind of got a little weirded out because again I'm young. I'm like probably 20 at the time, 21, and I don't know. I mean, all I was doing was I think I might have still even had long hair at the time. Snapshotting a photo of my long hair, like me and my gear and my setup with my hair in a ponytail, with all my gear on next to my bike. And submitting that picture in with a resume, trying to get sponsorship from people like Power Bar and South Coast Suzuki and all that. So, you get some sponsors. Some sponsors give you free product. Some of them give you, what is that when you get your, contingency program. Suzuki had a pretty mean contingency program.
Yeah.
But looking back, I could have, what would have happened if I would have reached out to that guy and said, yeah, you know what, I do need management, and took it seriously.
Sure.
Where could I have been, I mean, I had the heart, I had the practice, I had the drive.
Yeah.
I mean, literally I had the drive. I was living at that time down in Huntington Beach, and I was commuting 4 or 5 times a week up to where you could ride, Riverside area, San Bernardino County, just to go ride, and it just takes a toll on you. The time that it takes, the amount of gasoline, which include that's when gas is like $1.09 a gallon. Tires, equipment. Yeah, all the things that it's necessary to compete at those higher levels. When you see guys rolling up with their whole family and they're in their RVs and they got a box trailer being towed behind and they got 3, 4, 5, 6 bikes in there and they're racing multiple classes, open classes. Yeah, but even those guys, like Tyler Evans, even though that guy probably made a great career for himself, he was never the Jeremy McGrath. He was never the Ricky Carmichael. And then there's a flip side of the coin, is that what are some of the guys doing that didn't quite make it in that sport, at that level? What did they go on to do and pursue, and how did they pursue it? Like there's one guy named Ty Davis. He went on to go and race a lot of off-road enduro stuff, and he became like, I think, #1, like even Hare and Hound. Like he became really good in that. Yep. Then he found a niche and he opened up a business called Zip Tie Racing. So they're making custom products, and again, he took the essence of what he had, and then he went forth with it. He could no longer compete at the level where it was going to sustain him financially, but he took the passion and took it forward. And I guess that's what I'm looking at right now with the podcast and what I do. It's like, what people ask me, well, what is the podcast? And the podcast is about anything that, it's like that, like Joe Rogan says, that conversation. And the conversation is with anything I'm interested in. Anything that appeals to me or that's influencing my life or those around me that's interesting. And I think that no matter what sport you're chasing or what avenue you're looking after, if you're trying to be a journalist or an MMA fighter or a pro surfer or a professional whatever, I think that it's important that you have that follow through, that you look to delegate some of the things you can and cannot do. Like with this podcast, I have little to no idea when it has to do. And I'm pointing over here to this computer and the big screen and all the equipment. I don't know how to get it all to culminate into one, so that I have a production that's so quality that everybody wants to tune in. Again, the conversation is half the piece, but if you can't hear people speaking or if it's out of focus.
Well, that's why we're starting here, is because you have to take action in order to move forward, and any sort of action creates an energy which propels you. And I mean, it's going to be really fun to see how we're here now, but it's still like a work in process, and it's going to transform. And but that's life, and that's you, like the path you're on that started from those days. And there's little stories that you've told me that make me see how you creating a podcast and participating on that. There's other little things from stories you've told me which make sense about how and why you're doing this now. And it'll be fun to hear some of your stories.
I got some stories to tell. I do have a story to tell. One talk story, that kind.
Yeah, you can't tell them all in one podcast.
No, you can't. Get one long diarrhea sandwich.
It'll have to be a little intermission.
Yeah, for sure.
Popcorn break.
Well, that's why I made this for 25 minutes, because I figure, we can get out just a quick. Again, when you're starting out with something new, like we were watching Jenna and Julian podcast just now, and I've been kind of following them for a little bit. I try to watch as much as I can, but that's why this is so short, because sometimes people don't have that much time to listen to a bunch of rambling. Okay, sometimes it's just rambling to people. Even when we're listening to some Joe Rogan podcast, if you're not connecting with what they're talking about, you kind of almost have it in the background noise. You don't really get a lot, especially because his are like 3 hours long. So you have to be very committed to that. You either have to have your attention that's something on a mundane task, like you're doing gardening for the day, or like for me, in instance, when I tear apart into my cars, I start doing some wrenching. I throw the Joe Rogan podcast on. But I wanted to bring that up to light, that, like what you just said, it'd be interesting in seeing the progression of the podcast as it goes along.
Absolutely.
So like when you watch old Joe Rogan podcasts, or old The Church of What's Happening Now, or even old Fighter and the Kid, like when I say old, like the first couple episodes, if you will, or even the Jenna and Julian ones, like you see the progression, you see where they, all of a sudden, like it goes from like a real funky background with a lot of noise to pretty much just black. You know, like right here, there's a lot of color behind it. So if you're wearing color green, you're almost meshing in with that. Whereas if this is all just like a black background, we stand out. It's just, I mean, I've been noticing that a lot of them are going with the egg crate.
Why? Who's been doing that?
The Fighter and Kid did that.
Really?
And also the Jenna and Julian one. Joe Rogan, if you look at his old ones, it was just, they had a lot of stuff. They had like an owl, like, I'm not going to say they had an owl, but they had an owl. They had a salt lamp. They have, you know, they had the stormtrooper in the background. They had a bunch of LED lights strung up everywhere. And then all of a sudden you see the background change a little bit. You see some of the foreground change to where it's, you know, they find a platform that works good. Like, okay, we can see everybody. There's enough contrast to tones. The audio works.
Changing it too, though. Changing it up keeps people on their toes and gives them something to look at too. But it's dialing it in, and I think that's what this is all about: is dialing it in, right?
Yeah.
And maybe
foundation.
And you're probably gonna have to speak up just a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like
why don't we have the mics on at least? I mean, that's
I know, but then there's no that kind
dialing it in.
Yeah, I can't. Again, it's like I'll never get a podcast out for waiting on this. And I even put a Craigslist ad to get somebody in here to do technical work. The only problem is I haven't got not one response because there was no money involved. Hey, you know what, man?
That's tough.
Well, I know, but again, in some respects, I don't want any of those people that are only looking to do it for monetary reasons. You know, it's got to be something from. Look at, there's a possibility to make money, just like there was the possibility for you to make money in motocross. It's just how well are you going to prepare yourself to do it? You know, how well are you going to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, or like Conor McGregor says, don't come in at half-ass. Come in like you mean it, like 100%. You're ready for that fight. You know.
Be ready. Stay ready.
Ready.
Be ready.
And then, for example, just now when Jenna, from Jenna and Julian, and again, I'm using these references because a lot of it's real tangible knowledge. Like, she's saying they did a, I guess, question and answer with Julian, okay? Like, I guess, trivia. They were talking about celebrity trivia. And if you weren't watching the video and it was only on the audio one and you're on the plane or whatever, a lot of it doesn't make sense because there's so much of a dead silence. That dead silence kill a podcast if it's only on audio. Now, you can have a dead silence on the video version of it, but you're watching facial interaction. Somebody might be doing something like, oh shit, watch. And sometimes it's not within the words that you say. But in the case of an audio where, like I was just saying earlier to you, when we put something on, you put on a podcast and you're doing some work, not a lot of times are you really watching it. I mean,
yeah.
So back to the debate you had in the car, which even sparked this podcast. What was the debate about?
The debate was about going forward. Like, at what point do you got to start somewhere, okay? And I was making the point, like, yeah, but you don't want to start producing something that you're not even satisfied with, that you won't even watch or listen to. In the case of, it started with the motocross. Like, I was telling them that I wouldn't go out to the racetrack unless I had all my prep aligned, you know? And sometimes you don't have all the boxes checked, okay? Sometimes you forget one thing, like packing a lunch. And so now you're at the racetrack with no food, and you got to spend extra money for junk food there, or you forget gas, and you got to, when you get unpacked, there's no more gas, and you got to hurry up and jump in the truck, leave all your shit there at the racetrack, and jam down and go get fuel. There's a bunch of stuff that happens. That if you were better prepared, your experience would pay off better. You would have more fun. You would feel more accomplished at the end of the day, not feel defeated because you didn't have enough gas, or you didn't have a lunch, or your tire was flat, or your bike seized because you didn't do the proper maintenance. And again, these are references to racing, but I take those references of what I've learned and I take them to this podcast. I take them for what I do with my real life job, and this is, I don't want this to become one of those things where 5, 6, 7 podcasts in 10 podcasts, it's the same thing without learning my mistakes and really going forward. And I know a lot of it's the progression. Like, you do have to start somewhere, and that's why I turned the camera on because I was like,
unexpectedly.
Yeah. Because you were saying, well, you just got to do it, dude. So I decided to do that, and
well, I've been asking for a podcast, and then
well, we did a podcast with Dan.
Yeah.
Dan from Hawaii.
That was a few
Hawaii.
weeks ago now.
Yeah, but I never posted it because the battery shut off early. In fact, I'm going to check this right now.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
that
a
would
good
suck.
battery.
No, it's still on. We're
Yay.
good. But see, that's another thing. It's like I don't want to have to worry about the battery going off. I tried to connect it via USB to the computer. It told me to fuck off. It basically said, no, it's not going to happen. So, excuse me. I guess I got to keep this party rocking and rolling since I am your guy. Put that right there.
Your host.
People can see your beautiful face. I don't know how that affects it, to be honest. I don't know.
I don't either.
It looked like you had to
Like-
strap your nose a little bit.
I think it could affect the.
On the video, I know.
Yeah, the straw was probably up Lauren's nose.
I probably was fine. You, though, I think you had the straw up your nose.
This morning I wake up to a somber.
Oh, no. Oh. Okay.
I'm getting ready for work. All of a sudden, some news comes my way that